On my last video, I had so many of you guys messaging me saying, Chappie, you are wrong about how power affects matchmaking. So I went ahead and I asked Lilith what the true answer really is. Join me to find out. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another Rise of Kingdoms gameplay episode from your very own Chappie Gaming. If you're new to the channel, my name's Chappie. I'm a sponsored Rise of Kingdoms content creator, and today we are talking about how matchmaking in Rise of Kingdoms works, because I got a ton of questions on this on my video where I was talking about how to fight, how to contribute most to your kingdom, because historically, power was really, really important. But power is slightly less important now than it was before, which is particularly interesting. So I got the answers, and we can talk about exactly what the truth here is when it comes to how matchmaking in Rise of Kingdoms works. Now, matchmaking historically used to be based on a couple different factors. It would be based on the power of your alliance holistically. So if we look at the alliance here, they would go off of this number. It would be based loosely on the kill points of the people in your kingdom. And it was also based on the top 150 to 300 players. It varies. It's changed over time. But essentially, it was the top 150 to 300 players within your kingdom. Obviously, I'm in KVK, so these numbers aren't relevant. But you can find it the same way within your home kingdom if you're looking. And I can actually swap to a farm, so I can show you guys exactly how that works. Now, what's interesting here is this has changed, and Lilith has made a bunch of small tweaks over time, but this legacy algorithm where you'd have like A-seed kingdoms, Imperiums, and below, and it would all kind of matter when we talk about how KVK matchmaking works, is no longer really the case. And that is particularly interesting, at least to me. So how exactly does it work? Now, well, I got some answers. So I asked, and again, it's the top 150 to 300 power within here. I believe it's changed since, but that's not how it works anymore. And so I have to make an apology. I spoke to all of you guys. I thought I was right. I was saying how power has such a major impact, and it does have an impact, but it's not as much as it used to be. And I'll also call out that my video where I was talking about how you should play if you are a certain power is more representative of what I would expect when I look at you as a player and how you should be helping your kingdom, rather than necessarily how you should be for matchmaking. Matchmaking is a big component here, but it's not all about what I'm talking about there. So I asked Lilith, I said, I've had a lot of people push back. How does this actually work? And this was what they told me. They said, the updating matchmaking algorithm now primarily evaluates commander progression, level, skills, and expertise, equipment quality, set bonuses, refinement tiers, arsenal development, specialized military gear, probably armaments, things like that, and recent KVK performance metrics, last 2 to 3 seasons. Note, troop power will no longer factor into matchmaking calculations. Other elements may have minimal residual influence, but are being actively phased out. So what does this mean? Well, when we look at an account, let's look at this farm, for example. There are different breakdowns. You have building power, you have tech power, you have troop power, and you have commander power. What I read from this is troop power is no longer relevant. So if you're a T5 player, you're typically going to be around 59, 58 million power, and that's just unlocking the T5. That said, there are some players that do not unlock T5 Siege, which actually may be a good call as we look at how matchmaking works. Because if you're not going to use the T5 Siege, why would you unlock them? But if they're considering non-troop power, then that means you want to optimize your technology power, your commander power, and your building power. Now, your building power, you kind of have to max everything. If you don't want to max your gathering structures, fine, but it's not really going to make much of a difference. But technology power and commander power are interesting, because I do know players that have said, you know what, I'm just not going to unlock T5 Siege. In fact, Plotto another content creator, I'll link his channel on the top right, did that for the longest time. But what's interesting here, at least to me, when I read through this, is we talk about commander progression, levels, skills, and expertise. Okay? Well, if we look, let's go back to my main account here, at commander progression, because commander progression is almost directly tied to that commander power that we're talking about. It sounds like you can kind of double dip as we talk about optimizing. Now, today, if you're planning on migrating, there are ways to lower your commander's power. You just go in to any commanders that you have that are level 60 and you reset them. So, just as an example, I can open up Gajamata here. Here we are. And right now, his power is commander power, 119,500. That's his current commander power. Now, look what happens when I swap his talents to an empty talent tree. I got about 10 of these. Now, he's lost significant amounts of power because I'm no longer using those talents. Now, this is interesting as well because I wonder if you can also use a skill reset. Well, let's see what happens if I do that. I have 25 of these. Confirm. Now his commander power's gone even lower. Now, what's interesting here is, again, we're looking at commander progression, levels, skills, expertise. If this is really how things work, then if you're trying to optimize yourself for matchmaking, what you're going to do is you're going to go in to all of your commanders that you're no longer going to be using. Herman Prime is a great example. Nebu, Mehmed, all of these commanders that you're no longer using that are bloating your commander power stat, and thus your matchmaking, because commander progression is a big value here. And what you should be doing is resetting their talents like I just did, and resetting their skills to cut down that commander power, because that's going to optimize your posture when we talk about matchmaking in Rise of Kingdoms for KVK. And what you'll find is, sure, power is not necessarily a direct correlation when we talk about matchmaking anymore, because they're getting rid of that. But a lot of the whales that you find do have commanders that they've just maxed. Everyone's maxed the gold key commanders. I even know some whales that are like, I love getting all my commanders to level 60 just cuz. But what this is saying is actually, if you do that, you're making a mistake. Now, the next thing that's interesting is equipment quality, set bonuses, and refinement tiers. Now, most people are probably in a pretty good place with their equipment already. Let's look at my QSH, for example. This is, I think, a pretty good set. I do have a set, so I have a set bonus here. And I do have, this is archer equipment on an archer commander. So that makes sense to me. But what's interesting is we talk about set bonuses and refinement tiers. Well, what this is telling me is before I go into a KVK, if I have plans to refine or build a new piece of equipment, I should do it after KVK has begun. Because if I do it before KVK starts, I'm actually messing up my matchmaking. I'm making my matchmaking score higher than it needs to be. And so if I were you, and you have stuff that you're planning on forging, don't. Wait to forge it, and then when you're ready to actually use it in combat, then forge it. And the same goes for if you're thinking of leveling up a commander, if you're thinking of leveling up their skills, wait until right before combat. A, this lets you find out if Lilith is going to do any surprise commander releases. But B, with this news here, it's also going to help you optimize your KVK matchmaking. And if everyone in your kingdom is doing that, you're going to be in a really good spot. Now, the second piece here is interesting. Arsenal development, specialized military gear. What does that actually mean? Now, they've chosen some strange verbiage there, but my presumption is we're really talking about probably armaments here. Now, armaments are hard because you can't really optimize them all that much. Like, once you have them, you have them. You can't really get rid of them, and you shouldn't scrap them. What it does make me wonder is, are they looking at the armaments that are equipped to my commanders or not? Because in theory, if they're looking at that, I could just swap this over to line formation and I'm done, right? Now my Arthur is A-okay. But if they're not looking at equipped formations, then it begs an even more interesting question. Because technically, Arthur has no armaments right now. But if they're looking at this, and they're looking holistically, then for all of you hoarders like me, who have all of these legendary armaments that you're not using, I actually wonder if this is factoring into matchmaking at all. Because technically, I have a bunch of really good armaments, right? Elite for archers, this is awesome. I'm not using it, though. And so I'm very curious how this arsenal development is coming into play here. I don't know. And this next piece, recent KVK performance metrics, last 2 to 3 seasons. That's a big one. And it's particularly a big one when you end up in KVKs like the one that I'm currently in. Now, you guys may have missed it. I'll link it on the top right side of your screen. We didn't fight in Kingsland this KVK, which means my stats are extremely low relative to my previous KVKs. I got 286k deads, and I only got about 18 million kills. This probably makes it seem like our kingdom is going to have a lower tier going into this next KVK because holistically, our kingdom performance metrics are dog shit. That's just how it is. So this intrigues me because if they're averaging together the last 2 seasons, what this may mean is for those folks that are trying to get good KVKs set up for them, it actually may make more sense for your kingdom to plan in advance and maybe even register for every KVK pop. Because if you register for every KVK pop and you decide that you're going to have a farming KVK, and I know people are going to roast me in the comments, are going to be like, Shappy, don't you dare suggest this. But I'm trying to help people win. I know that this isn't the best for the player experience, but I'm trying to help you beat the algorithm. But if you do register and you have a farming KVK, then presumably everyone in your kingdom is going to have essentially really crappy performance metrics for the last couple KVKs. And so you can actually register, get all the gold heads and great rewards that you're going to get from KVK, which honestly, I've done the math. The gross majority of rewards you can get without ever fighting. This may be the new way to actually play Rise of Kingdoms if you're trying to optimize for your matchmaking. Now, I did have a question. I said, how does this actually work when we talk about relative performance metrics for specific players? And the answer I was given is regarding the matchmaking process. If a character had minimal participation in the previous KVK, they will not be factored into the calculation. Essentially, this means you no longer have to zero all the dead weight whales in your kingdom, which is amazing. I mean, I feel like this totally flew under the radar, but that's an amazing update. This also means that if you want to take a break from Rise of Kingdoms, your kingdom no longer needs to zero you, which is, in my opinion, a really, really good update. Like, that's something that we've needed for a long time. Now, my follow-up question was, well, how do we decide what minimal participation looks like? And the answer I was given is essentially, we look at your previous KVKs, and we see if there's a statistically significant decline in your contribution. For example, if I had 35 million kills in the last 2 KVKs, and then in this one I had maybe 5 million kills. That could, in theory, pull me out of the KVK matchmaking process in terms of being considered at a kingdom level. But where this gets even more interesting is if we go back to what I was saying a second ago about jumping into farming KVKs. In theory, your contribution is negligible every KVK. So can you actually make it so by the time you go for that 3rd KVK pop, you're just guaranteed an amazingly good matchup? I don't know, but this is really interesting. Now, let me know in the comment section what you guys think of this new matchmaking. I think it's probably a net positive This also means I can train a ton of troops and bring myself well over 100 million power. I still should be contributing in the way that I believe 100 million power players should be, but if power no longer matters, then I can kind of do whatever I want. So I apologize to the folks that were thrashing me in the last couple videos on this, but I just wanted to be upfront, get answers for you all. If you guys enjoyed, drop a like on the video. And if you haven't already, do hit that subscribe button right over there, bottom right-hand corner. Hit the bell so you get notified when new episodes come out. Thank you all. Chappy out.